Leo Mercer installed the cameras to catch a crime. What he saw instead broke him. Frozen on his grand staircase, the millionaire watched the hidden feed on his phone. His blind 5-year-old son, who had never spoken a full sentence to his specialists, reached out in the sunlit library, and he called the new nanny Mom. Leo Mercer had every reason to distrust her. A single father, a tech fortune built on paranoia, and a son, Oliver, who had retreated into a silent world after losing his sight. The nanny's resume was too perfect, so Leo wired his 12-room mansion with silent, watching eyes. He was prepared to see negligence, maybe even cruelty. He was not prepared for a miracle. The accident that took Oliver's sight took everything else too. His mother, Leo's ability to trust. For 2 years, the boy lived in a fortress of silence and fear, guided only by his father's increasingly desperate hands. Leo Mercer didn't build a $500 million security software company by believing in people. He built it by anticipating their worst impulses. His flagship product, Sentinel, was in half the corporate towers in the country, a digital system that learned employee behavior patterns and flagged anomalies. It caught insider threats. It predicted fraud. It turned paranoia into profit. But at home, his most advanced algorithms were useless. Oliver, 5 years old, had been visually impaired since the crash, not from birth, which the specialists said was a curse. He remembered light. He remembered colors. He remembered his mother's face. And then the world went dark, and he stopped trying to find it. He became a ghost in his own home. He wouldn't venture beyond the rug in the sunroom. He'd flinch at unfamiliar sounds. The team of experts, occupational therapists, mobility instructors, child psychologists came and went with clipboards and gentle failing smiles. Their reports piled up on Leo's desk, words like trauma-induced mutism and profound developmental regression. Their consensus was a quiet knife to the heart. Oliver might never live independently. He might never speak again. The last specialist, Dr. Evans, had sat in this very study just 6 weeks ago. "Mr. Mercer," he'd said, not unkindly, "we've hit a wall. Oliver needs consistency, a primary caregiver who isn't intimidated. The turnover in your household staff, the constant new faces, it's reinforcing his insecurity." Leo had stared out at the manicured lawn. So hire one person, one perfect person. Dr. Evans had sighed. "Perfect is the problem. You're looking for a unicorn. A highly qualified pediatric blind care expert who will live in, accept the isolation, and not be driven away by the environment." By you, he meant, by the surveillance, by the cold, echoing perfection of the house, by Leo's own simmering grief, which felt less like sadness and more like a permanent state of alert. That's when the agency sent Clara Vance. Her file was, as Leo later told his lawyer, criminally flawless. Masters in Early Childhood Special Education from a top university. 8 years at the prestigious Brighton Institute for the Visually Impaired. Personal references that glowed with phrases like child whisperer and inexhaustible patience. Her photograph showed a woman in her early 30s with dark hair in a serene bun, eyes that held a direct, unsettling calm. In the interview, she'd sat with her hands folded in her lap, untouched by the scale of the house. "Tell me about Oliver," she'd said, "not about the salary, not about the suite of rooms she'd be offered." Leo had laid out the failures, the silence, the fear. Clara had listened, then asked a single question. What does he love? Not what he's supposed to love. What does he actually reach for? Stumped, Leo had muttered, "The texture of his old wool blanket, the low hum of the refrigerator motor." Clara had nodded, as if he'd given her the master key to a vault. "Good, we start there." She moved in on a Monday. By Wednesday, Leo's distrust was a physical itch. It was all too easy. She was too quiet, too competent. She asked for specific odd things, a bag of dried rice, several spools of different textured ribbons, a child-safe heating pad. She spent hours with Oliver in the sunroom, her voice a low, steady murmur, not demanding responses, just painting word pictures of the room, of the feel of the sun through the glass. Leo's own business instincts screamed trap. Was she a corporate spy, planted by a rival to access Sentinel's development server in the home office? Was she a con artist, casing the joint for a later heist? Or worse, was she one of those caregivers whose kindness masked a chilling cruelty, the kind he'd read about in legal briefs about nanny cam cases. He couldn't ask, he couldn't show his hand, so he did what he knew best. He upgraded the system. The existing security cameras were obvious, at the doors and gates. He had his lead engineer, a fiercely loyal woman named Anya, come to the house under the guise of a system update. Together, they installed a shadow network, pinhole lenses in the decorative moldings of the main living areas, a camera disguised as a smoke detector in the playroom, a subtle, wide-angle view from a digital photo frame in the library. No audio. California's two-party consent law made that a legal minefield. But high-definition video, feeding to a secure, encrypted server only he could access. He told himself it was due diligence, protection. He was not a man who left things to faith. The first week of footage was ordinary. Clara reading tactile books with Oliver, getting his small hands over raised illustrations. Clara patiently helping him feed himself, narrating the position of the spoon, the cup. It was gentle. It was boring. Leo felt a fool watching hours of competent, dull care. Then, on the 9th day, he saw the shift. Oliver was on the floor of the library near the low shelves. Clara sat a few feet away. She didn't guide him. She didn't instruct. She simply said, "Your red truck is lost, Oliver. I think it's hiding. Can you rescue it?" The boy's head, usually bowed, tilted. A faint line of concentration appeared between his brows. He put a hand out, patted the smooth hardwood. Then slowly he began to crawl, not the frantic, disoriented scrambling Leo was used to, but a deliberate, searching movement. His left hand swept in an arc, sensing the space. He moved past the leg of an armchair, his fingers recognizing the carved wood. He navigated around the corner of a rug, feeling its edge. He crawled 5 feet. Then his searching hand brushed against a toy wheel. A smile, so small and fragile it barely existed, touched his lips. He pulled the red truck to his chest. Leo, watching from his office at midnight, felt his breath catch. It was the first unprompted, goal-oriented action he'd seen from his son in over a year. The next clip 2 days later was more profound. Clara had laid a trail of different fabrics from the sunroom doorway into the hallway, rough burlap, slick satin, nubby wool. She stood at the end, by the kitchen entrance. "Lunch is at the end of the ribbon road, Explorer," she'd said. "Follow the scratchy path, then the slippery one." And Oliver, holding onto the doorframe, took one hesitant step, then another. His bare feet felt the textures. He followed them, step by tentative step, out of his safe room and into the wider hallway for the first time without being carried. Leo watched the clip 10 times. Each time, a storm of emotions collided, a soaring hope so acute it was painful, and beneath it, a darker, colder current of suspicion. How was she doing this? What method was this? It wasn't in any of the specialists' reports. It felt intuitive, almost magical. And in Leo's world, magic was just undisclosed technology or deception. He began reviewing the footage obsessively, fast-forwarding through the quiet moments, hunting for the catch. He saw patience, but what if it was performance? He saw breakthroughs, but what was her real price? Then came the morning that changed the axis of his world. It was a Thursday. Leo had a major investor call at 10. He was in his study, reviewing notes, when a notification pinged on his secure tablet, Motion in the library. He almost dismissed it, but something made him tap the feed. Clara was there with Oliver. She had a new book, a large Braille primer. She was kneeling beside him, her back to the camera, her hands gently placing his fingers over the dotted cells. She was speaking softly. Leo cranked the volume on his headphones, but he could only hear the muffled rhythm of her voice, not the words. Oliver's face was turned up toward her, a look of intense focus in his unseeing eyes. His lips moved. He was trying to form a word. Clara leaned closer, her ear near his mouth. And then it happened, clear as a bell on the silent video. Oliver's small mouth shaped a single, unmistakable syllable, then another. "Mamas." Leo's blood turned to ice. He watched, paralyzed, as Clara went very still. Then, slowly, she reached out and drew Oliver into a careful, tender hug. His small hands came up and clung to the fabric of her light blue dress. She didn't correct him. She didn't say, "I'm Clara." She simply held him, her cheek resting against his blonde curls, her shoulders rising and falling with a deep, shuddering breath that looked like relief or grief. Leo couldn't tell. That's when the second notification pinged. Motion on the grand staircase camera. He switched views. And there he saw himself, frozen mid-step, one hand gripping the polished railing, his face a mask of shattered comprehension. He was watching the live feed from the library on his phone. In the background of the shot, through the open doorway, he could see the very scene he was now watching on tape. Clara kneeling, Oliver in her arms. The man on the staircase was witnessing his own moment of destruction in real time. Leo's jaw clenched, his knuckles white on the railing. The investor call, his company, his fortune, it all evaporated into static. The only real thing in the universe was the image on his screen and the echoing, silent word hanging in the air. Mom. He had installed the cameras to catch a stranger betraying his trust. Instead, he had caught a stranger giving his son back his world. And in doing so, she had taken the one role his wife had left vacant, a role Leo, for all his money and power, could never fill. The question wasn't about negligence anymore. It was far more dangerous. Who was Clara Vance, really, and why did his broken son call her mother? The file from the agency, the perfect resume, the impeccable references, it was all a facade. He knew it in his bones. He had to tear it down. He had to find the truth beneath, even if it meant destroying the first glimpse of light Oliver had seen in 2 years. He closed the video feed. He picked up his phone. He dialed not his lawyer, but Anya, his engineer. His voice was low, stripped of all emotion, a command from a man stepping onto a battlefield. Anya, it's Leo. I need a deep dive, everything on Clara Vance. I mean everything. School records, employment verification, bank accounts, social media footprints from 10 years ago. I want to know who she speaks to at night. I want to know where she came from, and Anya, do it off the books. No one can know. He ended the call. The cliffhanger was no longer a narrative device. It was the edge of the staircase where he stood, looking down into a home that was no longer just his, but hers too, and the fall was just beginning. Anya's first report landed in Leo's inbox at 3:17 in the morning. It was 3 pages long. The first line read, "The Clara Vance who lives in your house does not exist." Leo read those words in the blue glow of his monitor, the rest of the mansion silent around him. He felt a cold vindication, quickly swallowed by a deeper dread. He'd been right to suspect. Now he had to face what that meant. The report was forensic. The social security number on Clara's employment paperwork was valid, issued to a Clara Marie Vance, born in Oregon. But that Clara Vance, according to digital footprints Anya could trace, worked as a dental hygienist in Portland. She had never left the state. She had no master's degree. She had never heard of the Brighton Institute. The woman in his library was using a stolen identity. The references from the agency, forged. The phone numbers linked to dummy corporations that dissolved after a single call. The Brighton Institute, when quietly contacted by a prospective donor from Anya, had no record of a Clara Vance in their employment history, graduate or otherwise. "She's a ghost," Anya had written, "a highly skilled one. She didn't just fake a resume, she built a legend. This takes resources, planning, and a serious reason to hide." Leo's mind, trained in threat assessment, began cycling through possibilities. Corporate espionage seemed too convoluted. If she wanted Sentinel's secrets, there were softer targets. A kidnapper, but she'd had weeks of unsupervised access to Oliver. She could have taken him at any time. No, this was something else, something more personal. He gave Anya her next directive: forget the legend, find the woman, use facial recognition, run her image against everything, driver's licenses, news archives, social media, even old university yearbooks. Go back 10 years. There has to be a crack. While the digital hunt ran, Leo did something he'd avoided for days. He went to the library during one of Clara's sessions. He stood in the doorway, a silent observer. Oliver was at the low table, his hands buried in a deep plastic bin filled with dried beans. Clara sat across from him, her sleeves rolled up. "Find the treasure, Captain," she said, her voice warm. 3 metal bolts, they're hiding in the deep. Oliver's face was a portrait of concentration. His small hands sifted through the beans, his touch delicate, exploratory. He wasn't just digging, he was discriminating, feeling for the specific shape and coolness of metal amidst the organic texture. After a minute, his fingers closed around something. He pulled out a bolt, a triumphant grin breaking across his face. "First mate secured," Clara said. "No patronizing baby talk, just genuine respect. 2 to go." Leo watched, his conflicting emotions a war in his chest. This was the woman who had taught his son to navigate a hallway. This was the fraud who had lied her way into his home. Which was the real one? He must have made a sound, a shift in posture, because Oliver's head turned. Though he couldn't see, his hearing was preternaturally sharp. "Daddy," he said, the word clear, unprompted. It was the second word Leo had heard him speak in 2 years. Clara's gaze lifted to meet Leo's. Her calm didn't fracture, but he saw a subtle shift, a guardedness, a readiness. She knew she had to know he was digging. The perfect caregiver would smile, would invite him in. Clara simply watched him, waiting. Leo forced a nod. "Keep exploring, buddy," he said, his voice strangely thick. He turned and walked away, feeling her eyes on his back. Anya's breakthrough came 48 hours later, from a source Leo hadn't considered: obituary archives. "I ran her photo through a legacy database," Anya said over a secure line. "Got a weak hit. A local newspaper in a small town called Cedar Falls, Indiana, a community piece from about 7 years ago. A teacher's aide recognized for her work with special needs students." The image was grainy, black and white, but it was her. Younger, her hair longer, her smile less guarded. The caption read, "Ilara Holt, aide at Cedar Falls Elementary, celebrates a successful year with her students." Ilara Holt. Not Clara Vance, Ilara Holt. "Dig on that name," Leo said, a new kind of tension coiling in his gut. This wasn't just a false identity, it was a dead end leading to another name, a trail of breadcrumbs someone had tried to erase. The story of Ilara Holt began to form from fragments. She had grown up in Cedar Falls. She'd gotten a bachelor's in education from a state college. She'd married young to a man named Daniel Holt. She worked at the elementary school. Then, about 5 years ago, the trail went cold. No more employment records, no social media updates, no property records. Ilara Holt vanished. "Check the husband," Leo instructed. Daniel Holt was easier to find. He still lived in Indiana. He worked as a mechanic. His social media was public. And there, in a photo album dated 3 years ago, Leo found the pivot. The moment the entire investigation and his understanding of the woman in his house spun on its axis. It was a photo of a headstone, simple granite. The inscription read, "Lily Holt, beloved daughter, taken too soon." The dates beneath indicated the child had lived only 4 years. A comment beneath the photo from a friend read, "Thinking of you and Ilara today, Dan. Still can't believe it's been 3 years." Leo leaned back in his chair, the air gone from his lungs. Ilara Holt, a mother who had lost a daughter. He pieced it together with brutal clarity. The accident that took the child's life. He found a brief, tragic news article about a residential fire. Ilara had been at work. Daniel had been on shift. A faulty space heater in the little girl's room. She hadn't made it out. The article mentioned the mother was a teacher's aide, specializing in children with diverse needs. It quoted a neighbor saying, "She lived for that little girl. This will destroy her." It seemed it had, because after that, Ilara Holt disappeared. Her marriage, according to court records Anya unearthed, ended in a quiet dissolution a year later. Daniel Holt stayed in Indiana. Ilara vanished until she re-emerged with a new name and a forged past in the home of a blind little boy. Leo looked at the frozen video frame on his monitor, Clara, or Ilara, holding Oliver as he called her mom. The grief in her eyes, which he'd mistaken for something else, now screamed its truth. She wasn't just a caregiver. She was a ghost, haunting the life she'd lost, trying to piece together a shattered reflection of motherhood with someone else's child. The revelation should have softened him. Instead, It introduced a more terrifying variable. This wasn't a calculated plot. This was raw, unstable grief. What happened when the ghost was asked to leave? When the borrowed child was no longer available? What did a person running from that depth of pain do to stay in the light? His phone buzzed. Anya again. "Leo," she said, her tone flat, the way it got when the news was bad. "I kept digging on the fire. It was ruled an accident, faulty wiring, but I pulled the police report. There was a follow-up interview with the mother, Ilara Holt. The detective's notes are suggestive." "Read them to me." Anya cleared her throat. Quote, "Mother's account is consistent but displays elevated detachment. Clinical grief observed. When questioned about a prior incident involving the child and a locked closet, reported by a neighbor as a misunderstanding, mother became agitated. No charges filed. Case closed." Unquote. A locked closet, a prior incident, a misunderstanding. Leo's blood ran cold. The image of Clara's gentle hands guiding Oliver was suddenly overlaid with a darker possibility. What if her methods weren't just intuitive? What if they were born of a terrible, guilty knowledge? What if the very thing that made her so effective with Oliver was rooted in the tragedy that had taken her own daughter? He had to know. He had to talk to the one person who might have the real story. "Get me an address for Daniel Holt," Leo said, "and book me a flight to Indiana today." He didn't tell Clara he was leaving. He instructed the house manager to say he was away on sudden business. He watched her for a final moment on the cameras before he left. She was in the garden, helping Oliver feel the different textures of leaves, the waxy smoothness of a magnolia, the fuzzy softness of lamb's ear. Oliver was laughing, a sound so rare and beautiful it felt like a physical ache in Leo's chest. He was flying across the country to potentially dismantle the one thing making his son laugh. The flight was a torment of doubt. Was he protecting Oliver, or was he, like the detective in the report, misinterpreting grief as guilt? Was he about to destroy a woman who was broken, not dangerous? Cedar Falls was a town of quiet streets and old trees. Daniel Holt lived in a modest bungalow with a truck in the driveway. He answered the door in oil-stained jeans, a wary look on his tired face. He was a big man, worn down by life. "Mr. Holt, my name is Leo Mercer. I need to talk to you about Ilara." The man's face closed like a fist. "Don't know anyone by that name." He moved to shut the door. Leo spoke quickly, the words a calculated risk. "She's using the name Clara Vance now. She's caring for my son. My son is blind." Daniel Holt froze. The anger in his eyes dissolved into something more complex, pain, recognition, and a profound exhaustion. He stared at Leo for a long moment, then stepped back, opening the door wider. "You'd better come in." The living room was neat but sparse. A single photo on the mantel, a smiling little girl with blonde curls, Lily. Daniel didn't offer a drink. He sat heavily in a recliner, gesturing for Leo to take the couch. "So she's a nanny now," he said, not a question. "How did you find me?" Daniel asked. "I have resources. I found Lily's. I found the stone. I read about the fire." Daniel nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the photo. She never got over it. Who would? But it changed her, broke something in her that couldn't be fixed. Leo chose his words with care. The police report mentioned a prior incident, a locked closet. A shadow passed over Daniel's face. He rubbed a hand over his mouth. "That," he sighed, "that was nothing, a damn tragedy made into a monster." Lily was a curious kid, 3 years old. She climbed into a linen closet, pulled the door shut behind her. It was one of those old latches that stuck. She couldn't get out. Ilara was in the shower, heard her crying after maybe 10 minutes. She broke the door down. Lily was fine, scared but fine. He looked directly at Leo, his eyes earnest. A neighbor saw the broken door, saw Ilara hysterical, holding Lily, started a rumor. Someone called the cops. It was a nightmare, but it was an accident, just a terrible, stupid accident. Leo absorbed this. A coincidence, then, a precursor of horror that meant nothing but looked like everything in the shadow of the real fire. "After Lily died," Daniel continued, his voice dropping, "Ilara blamed herself, for the closet, for the fire, for not being there. She said she didn't deserve to be a mother. She started talking about making up for it, helping children who were lost in the dark. That's what she'd say. She got obsessed with Braille, with mobility training, with all this stuff. Said she had a calling. He looked at Leo, a deep sadness in his eyes. Then she left, took her savings, left a note saying she had to atone where she couldn't be remembered. I figured she joined a charity overseas or something. I never thought a private nanny using a fake name. He shook his head. She's not a criminal, Mr. Mercer. She's a casualty. Leo believed him. The man's grief was too real, too shared. The official story was tragic but clear. An accident, a grieving mother, a disappearance. He felt a surge of relief, immediately followed by a crushing weight of moral ambiguity. Ilara Holt was not a threat. She was a wounded healer. She had given Oliver his world back not as part of a con, but as a penance, a desperate attempt to heal a child as she could not heal her own. He thanked Daniel and left, his mind reeling. He had his answer. The mystery was solved. He could go home, confront her with the truth, offer her a real job under her real name, or let her go with a generous severance and a signed NDA. He was on the interstate, heading back to the airport when his phone rang. It was his house manager, Helen, her voice tight with panic. "Mr. Mercer, you need to come back. Now it's Oliver, he's gone." Leo's heart stopped. "What do you mean, gone?" "We can't find him. Clara said she put him down for his nap an hour ago. She went to start laundry. When she checked on him, he wasn't in his bed. He's not in his room. He's not in the playroom. We've searched the main floor. We are checking the grounds now." "Where is Clara?" Leo demanded, his voice a whip crack. She's frantic, sir. She's searching everywhere. She's calling his name. But Leo wasn't listening. The relief he'd felt in Daniel Holt's living room shattered into a million icy shards. The prior incident, the locked closet, an accident, Daniel had said, just a terrible, stupid accident. Oliver was a blind little boy in a 12-room mansion, a house full of doors that could stick, a house with a panic room, a wine cellar, a basement boiler room. A house that could become a tomb for a child who couldn't see the way out. He ended the call and yelled at his driver to turn around, to get him to the private airfield faster. As the car screeched into a U-turn, Leo's mind, the brilliant, paranoid engineer's mind, presented him with one final, unbearable calculation. He had just absolved Ilara Holt of malicious intent, but he had proven she was haunted by a tragedy where a child was lost on her watch. And now, on her watch, his child was lost. The two facts hung in the air, not connecting, not explaining, just screaming at each other. The bridge between Indiana and home had never felt longer or more fragile. He was racing back to a house that held either a simple, scary misunderstanding or the tragic, repeating echo of a nightmare he had just begun to understand. The 2-hour flight was a cage of pure terror. Leo spent it glued to his phone, watching the silent, empty rooms of his home via the hidden cameras, demanding updates every 5 minutes. Helen, the house manager, was coordinating the search with the other live-in staff, the chef and the groundskeeper. They'd checked every closet, every cabinet, under every bed. The outdoor security gates were closed and had motion sensor logs showing no one had passed through. Oliver was inside the house, somewhere. And Clara, the cameras showed her moving like a storm through the rooms. Her calm was utterly gone. Her face was pale, her movements frantic but systematic. She wasn't just looking, she was retracing steps, feeling along walls, dropping to her knees to feel under furniture at a child's height. She called his name, her voice cracking with a fear that seemed to scrape her throat raw. "Oliver, Ollie, sweetheart, where's your fortress? Tell me where you're hiding." That word, fortress. It clicked in Leo's frantic mind. 2 days ago, he'd watched a clip, Clara and Oliver in the library. She was teaching him the concept of safe places. "Everyone needs a fortress, Oliver," she'd said. "A place that's just yours, where you feel strong." She guided his hands to the underside of the massive oak desk. "Feel that? Solid, strong, that could be a fortress." But Oliver had been uninterested, his hands wandering to the bookshelf instead. At the time, Leo thought it was just another lesson that hadn't landed. Now, watching Clara search, he realized she wasn't just looking for a boy. She was looking for a boy who might be enacting a lesson she'd taught him, a boy seeking his fortress. Leo pulled up the camera feed for his private study, a room Oliver was never allowed in. The door was always closed. The camera there showed nothing. The panic room, a steel-reinforced closet off the master bedroom, had no camera. It was accessed by a disguised lever in the bookshelf. His blood went cold. What if Oliver, exploring, had somehow triggered it? The door sealed automatically. It was soundproof. A blind, terrified child locked in a pitch-black, silent vault. He called Helen. The panic room, check it now. He heard her running footsteps, then a fumbling at the door. It's locked, sir. The manual override isn't working. The code is 0912, Leo snapped, his wife's birthday. Try it. He heard the beeping of the keypad, then a hydraulic hiss. It's open, Oliver, Oliver. A moment of silence, then Helen's voice, confused. He's not in here, sir, it's empty. The relief was immediately swamped by a worse fear. If not there, where? His phone buzzed with a text from Anya, who was monitoring the system remotely. Leo, check camera 14, the one in the east hallway, second floor, at timestamp 3:18 p.m., just after the nap time check. He fumbled with the feed, rewinding. The timestamp showed the empty hallway. Then Oliver's door opened. The little boy emerged, dressed in his red sweater and dark glasses. He wasn't crying, wasn't stumbling. He moved into the hallway with a startling sense of purpose. He placed one hand on the wall, his fingers tracing the wainscoting. He walked 10 paces, stopped at a door, the linen closet. He felt for the knob, turned it. The door opened. He reached inside, patting the shelves. Then he closed it and continued. He was searching, methodically, room by room. Leo watched, mesmerized and horrified. This was the child who, weeks ago, would freeze if he lost contact with a wall. Now he was navigating the second floor alone, opening doors, investigating. He watched Oliver check 2 more rooms. Then, at the end of the hall, was the door to the back staircase, a narrow servant's stairway that led down to the kitchen and the basement. It was always kept closed. Oliver felt for the knob. It turned. He pulled it open. A dark, narrow void yawned before him. Leo's heart hammered against his ribs. No, buddy, no, he whispered to the screen. Oliver hesitated on the threshold. He crouched down, feeling the top step with his hand. Then, carefully, he sat and began to scoot down, step by step, on his bottom, one hand trailing the wall. He disappeared from the camera's view. The basement, a finished space with a home theater, a wine cellar, and at the far end, the boiler room and a door to the old, unused coal chute. Leo called Helen, his voice barely controlled. He's in the basement. He went down the back stairs. Find him now. He watched as Helen and the chef rushed into the frame and down the staircase. Clara was already there. She must have heard the door open. She was at the bottom of the stairs, calling into the dim basement. Oliver, I hear you exploring. Can you call back to me? Give me a sound. No response. Then Leo saw it. On the camera covering the main basement room, a small shape moved from behind the home theater's large sectional sofa. Oliver, crawling now, moving toward the far wall where a series of antique trunks were stored. He reached the wall, felt along it, and found a small decorative door, a leftover from the original house, maybe 18 inches tall. A mouse hole or an old laundry chute long sealed off. Oliver's fingers found the tiny brass knob. He pulled. The small door, warped with age, creaked open, and Oliver, his small body folding in on itself, began to wiggle inside. The far wall, the decorative door, he's going inside, Leo screamed into the phone. He saw Clara spin, her eyes locking on the spot. She sprinted across the room, dropping to her knees just as Oliver's feet disappeared into the darkness. Without a second's hesitation, she reached into the black opening. Oliver, I've got you, I'm here, let go, sweetheart, let me pull you out. There was a faint, muffled sound from the hole, a whimper. It's okay, Clara said, her voice shifting instantly from panic to a bedrock calm. You found an amazing fortress, the best one yet, but it's a solo fortress. Let's come out and build a 2-person fortress, okay, you and me. A pause, then slowly she began to pull. Oliver emerged, dusty but unharmed, into her arms. He was shaking. He clutched at her dress, burying his face in her neck. Clara held him, rocking back on her heels, her eyes closed tight. She was whispering into his hair, words the microphone couldn't catch. Her own shoulders trembled with spent adrenaline. Leo watched the storm inside him settling into a strange, numb stillness. His son had been lost, and had been found not by the security system he'd built, not by the staff he paid, but by the woman with the forged past. The woman who, in that moment of crisis, didn't sound like a nanny. She sounded like a mother who had just pulled her child back from an abyss. The jet landed. Leo's car was waiting. He arrived home to a silent house. Oliver, exhausted from the ordeal, was asleep in his room, with Helen sitting watch. Clara was in the kitchen, washing a single cup at the sink, her back to the door. She looked smaller, drained. Leo walked in. The air was thick with everything unsaid. She didn't turn around. "He's okay," she said softly. "He was scared, but he's okay. He said he was looking for a quiet place. The nap lesson, it didn't take. I should have checked sooner." He navigated the entire second floor and went down the stairs by himself, Leo said, his voice flat. Clara finally turned. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her composure a fragile shell. "Yes, he did. He used the techniques. He wasn't lost. He was exploring too well." "You taught him how to get lost." "I taught him how to not be afraid of being lost." The words burst from her, sharp with a defensive passion. "There's a difference. A blind child who is afraid of space becomes a prisoner. A blind child who knows he can map a space, even if he gets disoriented, becomes free." He knew the wall was his guide. He knew the doors were landmarks. He wasn't panicking. He was practicing. She looked down, her anger deflating. "But he's 5, and I turned my back. That's on me." Leo studied her. The grief, the guilt, the fierce, desperate love for his son, it was all real. It was also a reflection of a pain he now understood. "Ilara," he said. The name hung in the air like a struck bell. She went perfectly still, all the color drained from her face. The cup slipped from her fingers, shattering in the sink. She didn't even flinch. She just stared at him, her eyes wide with a kind of animal terror. "You went to Indiana," she whispered. "It wasn't a question." "I spoke to Daniel." A single tear tracked through the dust on her cheek. "Then you know." "I know about Lily. I know about the fire. I know about the closet." He took a step closer. "I know you're running from a ghost." She wrapped her arms around herself, as if holding her body together. "I'm not running. I'm atoning, or trying to. I failed my daughter. In every way a mother can fail. I thought if I could help one child, if I could give one child the confidence, the skills, the safety I didn't give Lily, maybe the universe would." She shook her head, the sentence dying. "It's stupid. It doesn't work like that. The forged identity, the fake references, why?" A sad, broken smile touched her lips. "Because who would hire a woman whose child died in her care? The agency did a background check. A real one would have flagged me. The tragedy, it's online. It's all anyone would see. They wouldn't see a qualified teacher. They'd see a cursed woman." She looked directly at him, her gaze clearing. "I needed the work. More than that, I needed the chance. I took it. I lied. I committed fraud. I understand if you call the police." Leo was silent for a long moment. The businessman in him calculated liability, breach of contract, the sheer audacity of the deception. The father in him saw the woman who had drawn his son out of a silent prison. "The mom," he said finally, the word delicate, "when Oliver called you that." Ilara closed her eyes. "It happens sometimes, with children who have a loss or a gap. They assign the word to the person providing the primary comfort. I never encouraged it. I never corrected him because to do so would have been to reject a gift he was offering, and he's had enough rejection. But I know it's not my place." She opened her eyes, her expression fierce. "He loves you, Leo. He talks about you. Daddy works. Daddy's chair. He maps you into his world. The mom thing. It's not about replacing anyone. It's about him finally having a word for the feeling of being safe." Leo felt something crack open in his chest. A dam of suspicion, of grief, of lonely pride. He thought of the hours of footage, not of negligence, but of patient teaching. He thought of her scream of terror when Oliver was missing. He thought of Daniel Holt's weary eyes saying, "She's a casualty." He made a decision, not as a CEO, but as a father standing in a kitchen littered with broken pieces. "Your real name is Ilara Holt," he said. "You have a master's degree in education. You have 8 years of experience at the Brighton Institute, where you developed innovative tactile learning curricula. I will make a donation to them sufficient to ensure your employment records reflect that. Your references will be provided by a newly formed family trust. The identity of Clara Vance will be retired." She stared at him, uncomprehending. "You will stay," he continued, his voice gaining strength, "as Ilara on the books, with a real contract and a significant raise on one condition." "What condition?" she breathed. "You stop atoning, you stop seeing my son as a penance, you see him as Oliver, and you let yourself be his teacher without wearing your own tragedy like a uniform." He paused. "And you get some therapy, on my dime, because this job, it can't be your fortress, Ilara, it has to be your home." For the first time, the wall around her crumbled completely. She slumped against the counter, a sob breaking from her throat. It was not the cry of someone caught, but of someone being offered a hand out of a deep, dark hole they'd been living in for years. In that moment, the dynamic in the house shifted irrevocably. The hidden cameras had done their job. They had not revealed a monster. They had revealed a complex, broken, incredibly gifted human being. And in doing so, they had forced Leo to see past his own fortress of money and control. The next morning, Leo sat with Oliver in the sunroom. "I heard you had a big adventure yesterday," he said. Oliver nodded, his hand on his father's knee. "Found a small door, it was quiet." "Were you scared?" Oliver thought about it. "At first, then I remembered the wall and Mom's voice. She said she would find me." Leo swallowed hard. "She will, she always will." It felt like an ending, a hard-won peace. The mystery solved, the threat neutralized, a new understanding forged. But Leo Mercer's world was built on layers. And just as one layer settled, another one, deeper and more dangerous, began to stir. A week after the incident, a formal envelope arrived by courier. Legal-sized, thick paper. It was addressed to Leo Mercer, CEO of Sentinel Security. The return address was a law firm he didn't recognize, Hartman and Vale Family Law. Puzzled, he opened it. Inside was a single-page letter. "Dear Mr. Mercer, we represent the interests of the maternal grandparents of Oliver Mercer, Mr. and Mrs. Arthur and Diane Voss. It has come to our clients' attention that you have engaged a live-in caregiver, one Ilara Holt, for your son. Our clients have conducted preliminary inquiries and have uncovered concerning details regarding Ms. Holt's past, specifically the circumstances surrounding the death of her own child. Given your son's vulnerability and what our clients perceive as a pattern of poor judgment on your part regarding his welfare, they feel compelled to take action. They intend to petition the court for grandparent visitation rights, with an initial focus on gaining oversight of your household staffing decisions. This is a preliminary notice. Formal filings will begin within 30 days. We suggest you retain counsel." The letter fluttered from Leo's fingers. He looked out the window to where Ilara was walking with Oliver in the garden, her hand guiding his to touch the petals of a rose. He had just finished building a bridge of trust, and now, from a past he thought was buried, a new force was mobilizing to burn it down. This wasn't about hidden cameras or hidden identities anymore. This was a battle for his son, and the battlefield was about to be a courtroom. The letter from Hartman and Vale wasn't just a legal threat. It was a surgical strike aimed at the one thing Leo had just rebuilt: trust. Arthur and Diane Voss had never approved of him. Their daughter, Grace, had been the light of their lives, artist, free spirit, his beautiful, impulsive wife. They'd blamed him for the accident, not explicitly, but in every cold silence, every missed birthday, every photo of Oliver they never asked to see. In their eyes, his world of technology and security was a cage that had ultimately failed to protect their daughter. Now they saw his hiring of a woman with a tragic past as a final, unforgivable failure. Leo's lawyer, a razor-sharp litigator named Naomi Thorne, laid out the cold reality in his study. Grandparent rights are a gray area, Leo. But in this state, They can petition for visitation if they believe it's in the child's best interest. They're not asking for custody. They're asking for a foot in the door. And their argument is potent. A billionaire father, absent due to work, hires a nanny with a falsified identity and a child fatality in her past. The judge will appoint a guardian ad litem, a court officer, to investigate Oliver's home life. Everything will be scrutinized, including the hidden cameras, Leo said, the weight of his own paranoia settling on him. Especially the hidden cameras, Naomi confirmed. It demonstrates a controlling, distrustful environment. It's the opposite of stable. Leo looked out the window. Ilara was teaching Oliver to identify herbs in the kitchen garden by scent. He could hear the soft murmur of her voice, Oliver's giggle as he crushed a mint leaf. "I'm not firing her," Leo said, his voice final. Naomi studied him. "Then we have to make her an asset, not a liability. We have to prove she's not a danger, but a miracle worker. We need evidence of Oliver's progress. We need character witnesses. We need to get ahead of this narrative before the Vosses paint it on the courthouse steps." The plan was audacious. They wouldn't wait for the guardian ad litem. They would invite the scrutiny. Leo's legal team would petition for a voluntary family assessment by a neutral, court-approved child psychologist to preempt the court-ordered one. It was a gamble. It put everything on display, but it was proactive. Dr. Aaliyah Vance, no relation to the fake name, was a renowned specialist in childhood trauma and sensory disability. She spent 3 days at the house, observing quietly. She watched Ilara work. She interviewed Leo separately. She played with Oliver, using specialized toys to assess his cognitive and emotional state. The tension was excruciating. Ilara moved through the days with a quiet dignity, but Leo saw the shadow in her eyes. This was her worst fear, her past being used as a weapon against the child she was trying to help. The turning point came on the final afternoon. Dr. Vance asked to observe Oliver's navigation time. Ilara, without fanfare, took Oliver to the foot of the main staircase, the same staircase where Leo had stood frozen weeks before. "Okay, explorer," Ilara said, her voice calm. "Your mission is the second-floor reading nook. Your tools are the handrail and your memory. I'll be your spotter." Oliver placed his hand on the polished banister. He took a deep breath, a small, serious expression on his face. Then he began to climb, one step, then another. He didn't rush. He counted the steps under his breath, a habit Ilara had taught him. At the landing, he paused, felt for the change in the carpet, and turned. He continued up the second flight. Leo watched, his heart in his throat. Dr. Vance watched, her pen still. Oliver reached the top. He moved down the hallway, his hand trailing along the wall. He stopped at the third door on the right, opened it, and walked inside. A moment later, they heard his voice, bright with triumph, float down the stairs. "I'm in the fortress." He had navigated 2 flights of stairs and a hallway to a specific room entirely independently for the first time. Dr. Vance looked from the empty staircase to Ilara, who stood watching with proud, anxious eyes. Then she looked at Leo. How long ago was he nonverbal and afraid to leave a single rug? 8 weeks, Leo whispered. Dr. Vance simply nodded, making a long note on her pad. Her report, delivered a week later, was a masterpiece of clinical detail that read like a vindication. It stated that Oliver Mercer showed remarkable and accelerated progress in spatial awareness, communication, and self-confidence. It noted the secure, consistent, and highly skilled attachment figure in Ms. Holt, and emphasized that the child's development was clearly thriving within the current caregiver framework. It made a single, pointed recommendation: continuity of care is paramount. Disruption of the primary caregiver relationship at this juncture would be psychologically detrimental to the child. It was the shield they needed. The hearing was a quiet, procedural affair. The Vosses' lawyer presented their fears. Naomi presented Dr. Vance's report. The judge, a weary-eyed woman, read it carefully. She looked at Arthur and Diane Voss. "Your concern for your grandson is noted, but the court's sole concern is his best interest. The evidence before me shows a child making exceptional progress. The petition for oversight of household staffing is denied." She then looked at Leo. "Mr. Mercer, the court is encouraged by your son's improvement. However, a child also benefits from extended family. I am ordering supervised bi-monthly visitation with the grandparents to be conducted at a neutral, child-friendly location. Let's build bridges, not forts." It was a loss for the Vosses' agenda, but a compromise that acknowledged their place. As they left the courtroom, Diane Voss stopped near Leo. Her eyes, so like Grace, were filled with a complex pain. We lost our daughter. We can't lose him too to strangers." Leo, for the first time, saw not adversaries, but two more people drowning in the same tragedy. "He's not lost," Leo said quietly. "And Ilara isn't a stranger. She's the reason he found his way back. You should see him." The war was over, not with a surrender, but with a strained, fragile peace. In the car afterward, Ilara was silent, staring out the window. Finally, she spoke. "You risked everything, your custody, your reputation, for me." "For Oliver," Leo corrected gently, "and for the truth. You gave me back my son. The least I could do was give you back your name." The house felt different after that, lighter. The hidden cameras remained, but Leo found himself checking them less. One afternoon, he called Anya into his study. "I want you to disable the shadow network, keep the perimeter security, but the interior cameras, turn them off." Anya raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" "I'm sure," Leo said. Trust, he was learning, wasn't the absence of risk. It was the conscious choice to live with it, eyes open. Life settled into a new rhythm. Ilara continued her work, now openly as Ilara Holt, with a formal contract and benefits. She started seeing a therapist, as promised. Some nights, Leah would hear soft sounds from the kitchen and find her there, making tea, her eyes distant. They'd sit in silence, two people who understood loss, not needing to fill the space with words. Oliver continued to blossom. He learned to read basic Braille. He could navigate the entire ground floor of the house. He started talking about school, a specialized program for visually impaired children. The word mom slipped out less often, replaced by Ilara or Lara. It was a natural transition, a sign of security, not of loss. Then one rainy Sunday came the final, surprising detail. Leo was going through old boxes in the attic, things he hadn't been able to face after Grace's death. He found a sketchbook of hers. She'd been a visual artist, always drawing. He flipped through the pages, a bittersweet ache in his chest, landscapes, still lifes, early sketches of a baby Oliver. Near the back, he found a drawing that made him stop. It was a portrait study. The subject was a young woman, her hair in a bun, her expression kind but reserved. Beneath it, in Grace's flowing script, was a note. "Clara, potential. She sees the world in textures, not colors. Fascinating. Could be wonderful for O." His breath caught. Clara. He went downstairs, sketchbook in hand. Ilara was reading a Braille story to Oliver in the library. Leo waited until the story was finished, then approached. "Ilara," he said softly, did my wife ever contact you before the accident?" Ilara looked up, confused. "No, why?" Leo showed her the sketch. This was in her book. The name underneath is Clara. Ilara took the book, her fingers tracing the lines of the drawing. Her eyes widened in recognition, then filled with tears. That's Clara Menendez. She was a teacher's aide at Brighton years ago. She was my mentor. She's the one who inspired me to specialize in tactile learning. She died of cancer about a year before I applied to your agency." She looked from the drawing to Leo, realization dawning. "When I was forging the identity, I needed a first name. I saw Clara in my old mentor's obituary. I took it as a kind of tribute, to remember the person who set me on this path." She shook her head, a sense of awe in her voice. "Your wife, she met Clara. She was considering her for Oliver." The coincidence was staggering. It felt less like chance and more like a thread, pulled through time. Grace, seeking a caregiver with a unique understanding, had found Ilara's mentor. And years later, in her grief and desperation, Ilara had unknowingly stolen that name to find her way to Grace's son. It was the final loop, closed. The hidden cameras had revealed a stranger who was, in the most mysterious and beautiful way, already part of the family's story. Leo framed the sketch. He hung it in the library, beside a recent photo of Oliver and Ilara reading a Braille book together. Two women, connected across time by a child, one remembered, one present. The story that began with suspicion ended with a tapestry of connection. Leo Mercer had installed cameras to catch a crime. He caught a miracle, a tragedy, a legal battle, and finally, the quiet, undeniable evidence that sometimes the people who come into our lives aren't strangers at all. They are answers to questions we asked long ago in a different voice, in a different light. So what is the real story here? Is it about hidden cameras or is it about hidden hearts? Leo Mercer's surveillance system gave him eyes, but it was only when he learned to look past the screen that he truly began to see. He saw a woman not defined by a single, tragic chapter, but by her relentless, loving effort to write a new one. He saw his son not as a problem to be managed, but as a person waiting to be unlocked. And in the process, he saw his own grief not as a fortress to live inside, but as a shared landscape where another person's loss could meet his, and together they could build something new. We live in a world wired for suspicion. We are taught to verify, to background check, to protect ourselves from the worst in people. And sometimes that vigilance is necessary. But this story asks a dangerous, beautiful question. What happens when our tools for seeing danger blind us to a miracle? What do we miss when we're only looking for what's wrong? Ilara Holt's journey wasn't about replacing a mother. It was about a broken person finding a way to be whole again by helping a broken child become whole. It was about atonement transforming into purpose. And Leo's journey wasn't about winning a legal battle. It was about a man learning that the strongest security system in the world is not made of code and cameras, but of vulnerability, forgiveness, and the courage to trust again. The sketch in the attic was more than a coincidence. It was a reminder that the connections that save us are often woven long before we need them, by hands we may never get to thank. Grace Mercer, in her intuitive way, had seen the path years before anyone else could walk it. She'd seen the value of a person who sees in textures, and in a way, she helped guide that very person to her son. Don't judge someone's entire story by the one scene you walk in on. The nanny in the uniform might be a grieving mother. The billionaire on the staircase might be a terrified father. The silent child might be a brave explorer, mapping a world he can't see. Sometimes the person we are most afraid of is the one holding the missing piece of our peace. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever completely misjudged someone based on a first impression or a single piece of their past, only to discover a truth that changed everything? Share your story in the comments below. If this tale of hidden layers and found family resonated with you, hit that subscribe button. We tell these stories because they remind us that behind every headline, every rumor, every locked door, there's a human story waiting to be understood. And understanding is where healing begins. Thanks for watching.